I said a prayer while I was up there. I asked Jesus to come into me, and then he asked me,
Jesus say to me, am I too close? And I said, you're not close enough.
There was something different about that set. It was not the cold of Italy. It was not the weight of the cross. It was not the real blood running down the actor's back. It was something else. Something no one could explain, yet everyone could feel. And it happened at the most unlikely moment possible, suspended between heaven and earth. When Jim Caviezel heard a question that did not come from a director, from a script, or from any human being standing there that day, it came as a clear inner voice, as undeniable as certainty itself. I am very close. That was not acting. It was an encounter. And the price he paid for that encounter was far greater than anything a Hollywood contract could ever cover. To understand what happened to Jim Caviezel, you first have to understand who he was before he ever said yes to that role. In the early 2000s, Caviezel was not some unknown actor hoping for a break. He was the exact opposite. After a powerful performance in The Thin Red Line, he had already established himself as one of the most sought-after actors of Hollywood's rising generation. Magazines ranked him among the 5 most promising talents in the business. Major directors competed for his schedule. He had already starred in Frequency alongside Dennis Quaid and in The Count of Monte Cristo, proving he could carry a major film on his shoulders. To the studios, he looked like the perfect combination of dramatic intensity and mainstream appeal. His future did not just look bright, it looked guaranteed. And it was at that exact point in his life, when everything seemed to be going his way, that the phone rang. The voice on the other end was Mel Gibson's. That conversation lasted long enough to redirect the course of an entire life. Gibson got straight to the point. There was a role that needed to be filled. A role unlike anything cinema had ever attempted before, and Caviezel was the name that kept returning to his mind. But before saying much about the character, the script, or the filming itself, Gibson said something very few directors would ever dare say to an actor at the height of his career: "If you do this film, you may never work in this town again." It was not a threat, it was a warning, an honest warning from someone who already understood what he was about to face. Caviezel listened in silence. Then he answered with a line that revealed a great deal about the man he already was, and the man he was about to become. He said that all of us are called to carry our own cross, that each of us can either carry it or be crushed by it, and that whatever talent he had was not given to him by Hollywood studios, but by something far greater. Gibson went quiet for a moment. Then he arranged an in-person meeting. That meeting took place at Gibson's house in Malibu, and it lasted 3 hours. It was not 3 hours of negotiation. It was not 3 hours of script reading. It was 3 hours spent talking about faith, about darkness, about the weight of history, and about the cost of telling a truth the modern world would rather keep embalmed in softened versions. Then, near the end of that meeting, 2 details came up that completely changed the atmosphere in the room. Caviezel mentioned that he was exactly 33 years old, the same age traditionally attributed to Christ at the crucifixion. Gibson stopped and looked at him. Then Jim added, almost as if he were mentioning something insignificant, "And my initials are JC." Mel Gibson froze. He stared at the actor for several long seconds, then finally said, caught somewhere between shock and nervous humor, "You're scaring me." In that moment, the casting choice stopped feeling like a normal decision. It began to feel like something else entirely, as if the choice had been made long before either of them ever arrived, somewhere beyond the control of both men. Caviezel's preparation for the role was anything but conventional. While most actors search for inspiration in other films, method techniques, or months of rehearsal, he went in an entirely different direction. He began attending Mass every day. He spent hours meditating on the Gospels. He went to confession regularly. He was not trying to build a character. He was trying to make room for something he believed was bigger than any acting method could ever reach. He prepared physically too. But somehow he already knew that what the set would demand from his body would go far beyond anything training alone could prepare him for. He was right. The first sign that these shoots would be unlike anything anyone had ever experienced on a film set came from the sky. Literally, the crew had climbed the hills near Matera to film the Sermon on the Mount, one of the most hopeful scenes in the entire film. The sky was clear. The air smelled of wet earth. Caviezel was taking his position on the hillside when, in a matter of seconds, the atmosphere changed. Clouds formed with unnatural speed. The air grew heavy. Then lightning tore across the sky and struck Caviezel directly, running through his body from head to toe. The cameras shut down. Technicians screamed. The smell of ozone filled the air. Caviezel survived. He was still standing, slightly dazed, with sparks still flickering at the ends of his hair. Assistant director John Michelini ran up the hill to help him. And before he could even reach the actor, a second bolt struck the exact same spot. 2 lightning strikes. The same location. Less than a minute apart. Both men were thrown to the ground by the force of the impact. Paramedics rushed in, and when they reached them, they found both men alive. No visible burns, clothes slightly singed, and expressions on their faces that no medical training could have prepared anyone to interpret. The odds of surviving a lightning strike are already low. The odds of surviving 2 in the same place, back to back, stretch far beyond any reasonable statistical explanation. After that day, something changed on the set. It was not a change anyone announced. It was not written in any production notes. It was simply there, hanging in the air. Filming days started with group prayer. Crew members who had no religious beliefs crossed themselves before turning on the cameras. And Caviezel himself began describing a growing sense that something was taking place on that set that had never been written into the script and had never been planned by anyone present. But what came next would test not only the actor's faith, but the physical limits of his body in ways no production insurance policy had ever imagined. During the filming of the scourging scene, the crew had placed a solid wooden board on Caviezel's back to protect him from the real blows of the whips. What no one had calculated was the angle of one particular strike. One of the actors playing a Roman soldier swung with too much force. The metal tip of the whip flew through the air and drove straight into Caviezel's back. The scream he let out, the one preserved in the final cut of the film, was not acting. It was real pain, sudden, involuntary, and brutal. He could not breathe. Years later, he would describe it this way: the pain was so intense that his body went into shock. And before he had any chance to recover, a second strike tore across his skin, leaving a wound more than a foot long. That scar is still on his body today, and that moment remains frozen forever inside the most devastating scene in the entire film. Then came the road to the cross, and with it, another test. Gibson had insisted on using a real cross made of solid wood, weighing well over 130 pounds. Caviezel had to carry it under the blazing sun, fall with it, rise again, and repeat the process with the full physical realism the director demanded. During one of those falls, the plan was for a soldier to hold the beam, so it would not crash down with full force onto the actor. The soldier missed. The cross slammed down directly onto Caviezel's head with all its weight. Some of the blood the camera captured in that moment was fake. A significant part of it was not. And when the doctors examined him after the scene, they confirmed what he already knew from the level of pain alone. His shoulder had been dislocated. The crew offered him several days of rest. He refused. He came back the next day with his arm still swollen and his shoulder numbed, and he finished every remaining scene that still had to be shot. But the physical suffering reached its peak during the crucifixion scenes themselves. Those sequences were filmed in winter, in bitter cold, rain, and relentless wind. Caviezel hung on the cross for hours, wearing nothing but a thin, soaked garment. The crew tried to warm him between takes, but by then his body had stopped responding. His temperature dropped to dangerous levels. Doctors confirmed hypothermia. His lips turned purple. His hands would not stop shaking. His breathing became weak. When the production tried to shut filming down, he refused, and he said a line that would become part of the legend of that set. "Christ did not come down from the cross. Neither will I." In the days that followed, the extreme exhaustion and the merciless cold led to double pneumonia. And once the film was over, the physical damage proved to be even worse than anyone had realized. His shoulder had been dislocated multiple times. The severe hypothermia left him trembling for months after filming ended. And years later, doctors diagnosed a heart arrhythmia serious enough to require 2 surgeries, including open heart surgery. The role had cost his body far more than any role ever should. And it was during those most extreme moments of filming, when his body had nothing left and his mind was balanced somewhere between performance and collapse, that Caviezel experienced what he would later call the most extraordinary moment of his life. Suspended in the position of crucifixion, with real cold and real pain merging with the symbolic weight of what he was portraying, he heard something, not with his ears, with something deeper than the ears can reach, a presence drawing near, a question forming inside him with a clarity impossible to fake or invent. I am very close. And inwardly, Caviezel answered with the response his faith had been training into him his entire life. If you are asking, then you are not close enough yet. That was not a rehearsed monologue. It was a conversation that took place in a space cameras cannot record and scripts cannot enter. And it was not the only unexplained thing he experienced on that set. When lightning struck him during the early days of filming, Caviezel later described something that went beyond physical survival. For a brief instant, he said he saw himself from outside his body, as if he were looking at himself from above. He could not explain it as electrical shock or simple disorientation. To him, it felt like contact with something beyond the physical world, a reality outside the limits of ordinary experience, one that the role itself had somehow opened in a way he never expected and never forgot. The impact of those weeks did not stop with Caviezel. The entire set was being changed by something no one had written into the production contracts. Extras who had shown up simply looking for a paycheck began asking to be baptized before filming ended. Some of the principal actors went through spiritual conversions that permanently altered the direction of their lives. The actor who played Judas Iscariot had arrived on set identifying openly as an atheist and deeply skeptical of any form of religious faith. By the end of production, he had entered the Catholic Church and was baptized along with his family. He later said that playing the man who betrayed Jesus became the very path through which he understood, in a way reason alone never could, the depth of God's love and forgiveness. The actor who portrayed Barabbas, the criminal released instead of Christ, went through an experience he would later describe as a turning point in his entire life. In the scene, all he had to do was exchange a look with Caviezel while the crowd shouted around them. No dialogue, just a look. But when their eyes met, what he felt was not the force of a well-executed performance. It was something else. "I didn't see an actor," he would later say in an interview. "I saw something that was not human. I felt like Jesus was looking at me and forgiving me." For weeks afterward, he could not sleep. Caviezel's face would not leave his mind. After filming ended, he embraced the faith, was baptized, began speaking publicly, and years later wrote a book describing that experience as the turning point of his life. Then came February 25th, 2004, Ash Wednesday, the day The Passion of the Christ was released. Hollywood watched with the smug confidence of people who believed they already knew exactly how it would end. No bankable stars, no major studio backing, no conventional marketing campaign. Filmed in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Latin. Rated R for explicit violence. By every accepted rule of commercial filmmaking, it looked like a guaranteed failure. What happened instead was the exact opposite of everything the analysts had predicted. Lines stretched for entire city blocks. They looked less like movie crowds and more like pilgrimages. People came carrying rosaries, wrapped in heavy silence, whispering prayers. Churches organized buses. Parishes bought out entire screenings for their congregations. In many cities, the screenings took on the atmosphere of spontaneous liturgy, with moments of prayer breaking out inside the theaters themselves. People fainted. People sobbed uncontrollably. Some viewers had to be assisted out after specific scenes. In Kansas, a 56-year-old woman died of a heart attack during the crucifixion scene. This was not a film people were simply watching. It was something they were living through. The numbers were just as impossible to ignore. The film earned more than $610 million worldwide, with over $370 million of that coming from the United States alone. It became the highest-grossing non-English language film in cinema history and held that distinction for 2 decades. It also remained the highest-grossing R-rated film in the domestic U.S. market for years. The same studios that had refused to invest a single dollar into the project now had to watch their own productions get pushed aside while the world showed up to see one thing: Jesus Christ. But instead of opening doors, that triumph opened a chasm. The campaign against Caviezel began almost immediately after the film's release, not through attacks on his performance, because from a technical standpoint, that was nearly impossible to challenge. It happened in a more subtle, more calculated way. The industry simply began to go silent. The offers stopped coming. Agents stopped calling. Projects disappeared. The same face that had been sitting at the top of major studio casting lists only weeks earlier suddenly became a name nobody wanted attached to a commercial production. Unofficially, he was labeled difficult, fanatical, too much trouble. At a conference in 2011, Caviezel confirmed what many suspected but few were willing to admit openly. "They told me my career was over," he said. "And the worst part is, they were right. But then he added the line that seemed to summarize everything. "If I had to choose again, I would make the same choice without hesitation." Not for a fraction of a second. That rejection did not turn Caviezel into a bitter man. It turned him into something far stranger by Hollywood standards. A man at peace with the consequences of his convictions. He began traveling around the world, speaking about faith, suffering, and hope. He adopted 3 children with disabilities from China and raised them away from the spotlight. He visited prisons and hospitals, sharing a testimony forged on an Italian hillside in freezing weather, with a wooden cross crushing down on his shoulders. His agency dropped him. The media mocked his public declarations of faith. Social media attacked him, but he did not bend. Then the turnaround came from the last place anyone expected, and in the only way that made sense after everything he had already lived through, from outside the very system that had pushed him out. In 2023, Caviezel starred in Sound of Freedom, an independent film based on the true story of a former American agent fighting child trafficking. Disney had acquired the rights to the project through its purchase of Fox, then, for reasons never clearly explained, left it shelved for years. When the film was finally released, without the backing of the major studios, the Christian audience did what it had done 2 decades earlier. It mobilized, it shared, it spread the word to anyone willing to listen. And social media did what church caravans had done in 2004. The result was another shockwave. The film earned more than $250 million, outperforming major budget releases from Disney and Warner during the same stretch. Caviezel was suddenly back in the headlines in the exact same pattern as before, through a project the system had rejected, only to watch it become a global phenomenon against every prediction. When asked what that comeback meant to him, he answered with the kind of clarity that felt like the distilled summary of everything he had endured. "God gave me a second chance. When the world slammed doors in my face, he opened a much bigger one. But there was still one more chapter to come, and it may be the most surprising of them all." Mel Gibson never saw the Passion of the Christ as the end of the story. In his mind, it was always the first half of something larger. For years, quietly and behind the scenes, he had been working on a script he described as an encounter with the ineffable. Something, in his own words, that no human eye had ever seen on screen before. The project would be called The Resurrection of the Christ, and it would not be just a sequel. It would be the missing second half of a work Gibson never believed was complete. The script explores not only the resurrection itself, but also what happened between Friday and Sunday, while Christ's body lay in the tomb, the descent into Hades, the confrontation with the forces of death, the liberation of the souls who had been waiting for the promise. It is a vision shaped by apocryphal writings, patristic sources, and fragments associated with the Gospel of Peter. For years, rumors circulated that Caviezel would return to the role, and he himself confirmed that possibility in interviews. But in 2025, Gibson made an unexpected decision. He would not bring back the original cast. The role of Jesus would now be played by Finnish actor Jaakko Outonen. According to Gibson, the reason was both artistic and symbolic. Every generation needs to see the face of Christ with fresh eyes. The budget is expected to exceed $100 million, more than double the original film. The release is planned in 2 parts. The first is scheduled for March 26th, 2027, Good Friday. The second is set to arrive 40 days later, on May 6th of that same year, the day of the Ascension. Nothing about that timing is accidental. Gibson insists the calendar was chosen by faith, not by marketing strategy. He wants the experience to be lived almost like a liturgy, not consumed like a franchise. And Caviezel, in a twist almost no one expected, confirmed that even as he prepared to step away from the role that defined his life, he would still return to that biblical world in another form, playing the villain Herod in a parallel biblical project. The man who had truly bled, truly trembled, and truly heard a voice no screenwriter had written, was willing to step back into the universe that had both shattered and remade his career, this time from an entirely different angle. At its deepest level, the story of Jim Caviezel reveals something Hollywood could not process in 2004 and still struggles to process now. There is a kind of choice that cannot be measured by the ordinary logic of risk and reward. When Caviezel heard Gibson's warning and answered that we all carry our own cross, he was not making an abstract spiritual statement. He was announcing, perhaps without fully realizing it, what he was about to do with his own body, his own career, and his own life. The lightning that struck him twice, The whip that tore open more than a foot of skin. The dislocated shoulder he refused to treat before finishing the scenes. The double pneumonia. The 2 heart surgeries. The years of silence from the studios. He carried all of it. And he never changed his story. There is one line he has repeated in different interviews over the years, always with the same unsettling calm of someone who is not trying to persuade anyone, only to say what he knows he lived through. I went to that set as an actor. I came back as a witness. And when he is asked about the voice he heard during the crucifixion scene, the question that echoed inside him while his body shook from cold and pain, he does not hesitate. He says it was real, more real than anything that happened in front of those cameras. And he says the answer he gave in that silent moment, that the present still was not close enough, remains, to this day, the truest thing he has ever said in his entire life. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass it along to someone else. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next videos. May the peace of Christ always be with you.